Do you ever freestyle?
I'm like the worst freestyler.
Could you try for fun?
The first bar that comes to my mind, I just passed the mic to Pastor Mike Grace. I mean, that's the pace that I'm moving at. We moving the pace of grace. There you go. I can't freestyle.
I love it. Coming up on Grace After Hours, I want to introduce you to Christopher Syncere. He's a Christian rap artist with crazy talent and a really genuine heart. We talk about childhood pain, Lady Gaga, and how he is determined to not let what happened to him happen to his future kids. I'm Jeanne Harrison, and this is Grace After Hours.
I don't want to see no more dry bones taking up space. Now God, give him your hand. We gon' live, we gon' live, we gon' die. We gon' live, we gon' live to know God. Saying I serve you, notice I command you to step down right now. You don't got plans. Look. God, I declare right now it's a breakthrough. We gon' break through. We can't stay here.
Do you think rap music can be worship music?
100%. Yeah. I think, and this is just like my take on that. I think any genre of music can be. I think worship isn't so much a genre. I think it's a heart posture, you know, and so there's like, my friend put me onto this like screamo, this like Christian screamo band a couple years ago, and they're literally like, they're talking about, I surrender my heart to you, Jesus. Like, I mean, it's not for me personally,
Sure,
but for the people that it's for, I think that can be, you know, I mean, there's times I'm like having my worship time in the morning and I'll play Christian rap, like, and it is, I mean, genuinely, I think it's been some of the most impactful times in prayer, in worship, where there's been Christian rap music playing.
My husband, I think, would totally agree with you. Lecrae was like huge in his life,
Yeah.
and he started listening to secular rap. But I'm telling you, we would sit in his car dating, and I did not grow up listening to rap. It took me a minute to even understand what they were saying. And it was Lecrae, and Clint would break it down. He loved the beat, he loved the words, he loves everything about it, and it absolutely discipled him.
Yeah.
And I'll say, I heard you live for the first time at the night of worship.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not even kidding. The guys don't know this. I ran to the broadcast room to say, because we wanted to bring you on the podcast, to be like, guys, are you getting this? He's amazing. Like, we have to sit down and talk to him, because it was so, even someone like you're saying, I never grew up listening to it. It's probably not the first thing I would put on, but it was like electric seeing you on stage and I feel like what it did for me was, it just was like, made God huge. It was artistry, it was passion, and there was hype to it, but it wasn't just hype. It was like, it was powerful. It was beautiful to me. So I really resonate with what you say. It's absolutely worshipful.
Yeah.
Tell me this. How did you end up where you are now? Are you full-time artist?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, so this it's something that started from the time I was like 16 years old. Well, really 8 years old. I used to love Demi Lovato when she first came out. She was like my favorite, you know, back in the Camp Rock Disney days. She had a radio interview on Radio Disney, and I had this little what's it called, alarm clock, but it had like the radio on it, and so I tuned in, and I'll never forget, it was like 8 p.m. She was doing her interview, and I'm listening to her talk about like each of these songs, and she was like, oh, I was going through this breakup, and and in my mind, as at that time I'm 8 years old, I'm like, wow, so you actually can make music about stuff that you're going through. All I heard was growing up was like Lil Wayne, talking about like drugs and shooting people and stuff, and so when I'm hearing somebody actually talking about like, wow, they really experienced this, they really went through this, and she made an album about this, I'm like, so what do? The first girl that breaks my heart, 5th grade, Lexi Dombrowski, I'm throwing you under the bus.
You made a song?
Yeah, that was my first song.
Do you remember it?
Yeah, a little bit. I said something like, I said something like, it was horrible. I mean, there's something about like, she played me like a violin, and I burned like toast, I think is what I said. Like, that was like,
The similes.
yeah. I was like, oh my gosh. Looking back, I'm like, that's horrible. But I'm in 5th grade, so it's okay.
Oh, I
But
think that's awesome.
and then as I came into my relationship with the Lord, 15, 16 years old, I didn't touch music for a while, which I'm grateful for. I think especially now, with like the 16, 17, 18-year-olds that I come across, who are wanting to make music, they're very like, it's very like, oh, I can post content now.
Yes.
And post one video and blow up. All right, let's do this. And so there's no like deep foundation in their relationship with God. So I'm grateful that the Lord had me not even touch, a pen or a pad for a year, 2 years in the beginning of my relationship with God. And even then, there wasn't any growth for years. And so it just was a lot of, doing ministry with my uncle, like, street ministry, downtown Orlando, downtown Tampa. We'd be like
sharing your faith and stuff.
Yeah, we would be like outside of like, some random like club or bar, like, and I would have this like, rap verse where I would just rap my testimony to people. And it was like, my uncle had me doing that and praying with people.
Wow.
And, he could have allowed me the opportunity to be on stages because he does spoken word. He travels for spoken word and stuff. And those opportunities came eventually. But for the first couple of years, it was just like, we're gonna get you to do ministry off of a stage. And he had me doing the street ministry and all of that. And then eventually he started bringing me on, different stages with him, which connected me to different people. Then through a long tedious process, somehow I got to where I'm at now. So,
well, I remember watching an interview with you, and you're very open about the fact that you grew up in what you would call a broken home without a dad. How has that impacted you?
Yeah, that's kind of the basis of everything that I do, is to reach people that, that grew up like me, fatherless home, and all the stuff that I came from. But personally, to answer that, how that's impacted me, I think now entering my, my mid-20s, I'm realizing the impact that coming from the home that I did. I'm realizing how it affects me now more than ever. I mean, genuinely, like there are areas where I have had to really take before the Lord, because I'm like, God, I want to be a good man. I want to be a good husband. But so much of me still shuts down when I get yelled at, or when I, get corrected, or and that's all stemming from the verbal abuse from my father.
Yeah.
And so it's like, God, I really have got to continue to lay these things at your feet, and I've got to continue to work through these things. Because if not, like, I mean, the way statistically, black kids that come from a fatherless home, they either end up, dead or in jail, or just repeating the same the same pattern. And so, like, everything in me wants to break that. Everything in me wants to say, that's not going to be me. It's not going to be my future. And so if I don't work through these things now, before we give the I do's, before, we have our first children, like, people tend to repeat those very same ways that they were brought up. And so, yeah. Obviously,
it's not like you're going to, break it in a day, but what are some things you've done to begin to deal with it? Mm-hmm. And I'm curious, you say, you shut down if someone yells at you. Mm-hmm. I totally can see that. Do you feel like, is that anybody? Is it more if it's a male, if it's someone in authority over you, or could it even just be a friend? And then how are you dealing with that? What do you do? What do you do now?
Yeah. When I do find myself being challenged or being, corrected by authority and stuff, oftentimes there's that feeling of inadequacy, but it's telling myself, no, like I belong to the Lord. I'm his. What more is there that I need? Obviously we want, the approval of people and whatnot. But yeah, when I find myself at the feet of Jesus, reminding myself of his truth, that I'm more than a conqueror through Christ Jesus.
Yes.
That I can do all things through Christ Jesus. That gives me strength, that the head and not the tail. I mean, repeating these things over myself. And this is, again, something I learned in counseling. Shout out to counseling.
Amen.
But yeah, I have to repeat these things. I have them written on a whiteboard in my room, and I'll read them in the morning before I, head out of the house. And in the same way, I had to unpack a lot of the things my father told me I would repeat in my head over and over. It's repeating these like kind of positive affirmations until it sticks. So yeah.
I love that. It's interesting, you were talking about your friends with Elijah Lamb, who I've sat down and talked to also, and he made this comment that he began to feel like the only thing that made him matter was what he could produce, what people all like loved him for, and realizing that in God's eyes, he's like, that's not even like my top 100 favorite things about you, like who you are. And I love that you say you're enough in Jesus, because with his love, with his acceptance, there's nothing more you need. And actually, I feel like to have someone like you sit here and be humble and be honest and vulnerable, there's so much strength in that. I feel like sometimes we think that manhood is this very broken picture of just, and honestly, the men I know who are just like, my way or the highway, I think deep down there's a deep insecurity that
100%.
Actually fuels all of that. And to be a man who's able to say, I am broken and I am growing through it and I have insecurities. My husband says things like that. And it just, to me, that's real manhood. That's someone who's humble and who's growing, and who I would want a son to grow up and be just like, you know? What would you say to somebody who comes from a broken background? Maybe their dad was present, but damaging. Maybe he was physically there, but emotionally absent, or maybe it was a mom, or what would you say to them?
I think I think there's a couple things, right? One, it's realizing, and this is the same thing I had to realize, your parents did the best they could with what they had. When I was 4 years old, my dad walked out, on my family, for the sake of protecting my parents. I won't get too into it, but
Absolutely.
I mean, I remembered, some of the things I saw, just verbal abuse, and right in front of me and my sister. I remember my dad leaving, and he just never came back. And I would ask my mom, I even could get emotional. I'm a crier. So if I cry at some point, but, I remember crying in my mom's lap saying, Mom, why does it have to be like this? Sobbing, because me and my dad had just gotten off the phone and he like cussed me out, a 12-year-old. And, so I would say, so to answer the question, I told you I talk a lot, so I'm kind of, it's realizing my mom did the best that she could with what she had. She had my sister, she was pregnant with my sister when she was still in high school, had my sister super young. And then she had me super young also. So when my dad leaves, it's just her 2 kids. She's the same age as I am right now. And I can say, okay, well, she obviously still wanted to live the young person life. I mean, the average adult, you know, in their young 20s, they're wanting to go out to the club, and my mom did a ton of that, you know, which I can either be angry about, or I can understand and say, okay, I get it. You're in your young 20s. Nobody expects, you know, to be unmarried, and, you know, so oftentimes I was with either my grandpa or my grandma, and my mom would be in Miami somewhere, you know, turn it up. But she also, to keep a roof over our head, would work extremely hard. She'd work double shifts, you know, there were nights that she wouldn't eat so that me and my sister could. And so we were living with, you know, my grandparents, and she was doing the best that she could. And looking back, I can see that. But if I let my anger get in the way, all I see is like, Mom, you were working all the time. You know,
Yeah.
like you weren't there for me. And, you know, and so my dad is a whole other thing that, like, you know, I'm like, it was really hard for me to say, well, I don't know if I can say that about my dad, because he like left, you know, so is he really doing the best that he could? But 2020, my mom actually still remembered my grandparents' address, you know, so I remember I wrote a letter to my grandparents, hand wrote it, put pictures in there. I updated them on my life. You know, I hadn't at that point seen them in like 15 years since I was a kid. I go to their house, knock on the door, and I see my grandma. She opens the door, and I was like, I just want you guys to know that I forgive you. And she was like, in the most like unexpected, I thought it was gonna be some super awesome, like nice, sweet moment. She's like, forgive me, forgive us for what? Like, you know. And I remember leaving even more hurt and even more angry. But in that, I realized, man, if my grandparents are like this makes sense why my dad was like this.
Yeah.
And so there's probably something going on there that they are running from, that they have to work through. So it's being able to have grace toward them and say, okay, like that's their own life. My mom has her own life. My dad has his own life. Those are things that they have to work through. And whether they choose to or not is up to them. And then this is the last thing that I would say, and this is leading into this. Sure, they have where their own trauma and their own things to unpack, but that doesn't have to continue with me. That can stop with me. You know, I have the choice. I have the option to say no. Like, the Lord gives us power over these things, and obviously it's not it's not easy to break something when it's like kind of all you've seen and all you know. But God's grace is way bigger than what we think we're capable of, you know? So
I love that those two things you said, because what I hear is grace and truth. The grace is they did the best they could. And I think there's peace in letting them off, like not being so angry forever, but saying they did the best they could with what they were given. And then the truth is, but I don't have to do it the same way.
Yeah.
I can do it the way God's called me to.
For sure.
And I even feel like as a mom, that means a lot to me, because I remember a season when I kind of told my mom, I just wanted to hold her feet to the fire, to be like, you did this and it was wrong. Like something small, but something about the way she interacted with me when I was young. And her one day just saying, yes, I did. Could you just love me anyway? Can we admit that it was wrong, and can we move past it?
Yeah.
And you go do better. And now that I'm a mom, I'm like, gosh, I this idea that they could do it perfectly is not true, but I hope one day my kids can say, yeah, my mom did some dysfunctional things. No matter how well you try, but she's broken too. It came out of patterns in her life. I'm going to go do better, and I'm going to show some grace to her. I think that's a really healthy perspective. Earlier, you mentioned you get up really early, a quiet time. What are your rhythms like for, keeping on the path you're on? What do you do?
Yeah. So as I said earlier, I'm like the most like unorganized a creative person.
It's funny you say that because there is a structure to you. I hear
For
too.
sure.
Yeah, you have both.
Yeah, there's some things where I'm like, okay, I'm gonna get up at 5 a.m. every day. As far as what happens in like the first 2 hours of my day is always different.
Okay.
So, well, let me not say always different. I start my day in the Word. I start my day, praying and giving my day to the Lord. And then it could look different. I'm either like, reading I'm reading Dangerous Jesus right now by KB. And then as the day goes about, I love people. So I'm like, man, who can I hang out with? Who can I hop on a FaceTime call with? Who, and check in on. And then by the time my girlfriend gets out of work, she does her, her thing. We spend a lot of our evenings together, just, hanging out and doing life together. So
Do you listen to any? You said who you read. Do you listen to any artists that influence you?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I've always been a huge, we could do a whole other podcast about this. Kanye West, I think, is the greatest artist of all time. So yeah, Kanye, Michael Jackson, I think is one of the greats, which is funny because he passed away when I was 9 years old. So, I was a kid, but
Still influential. Yeah.
100%. Yeah. And then on the Christian side of things, I'm a huge Lecrae fan. Obviously, he's one of the pioneers of Christian rap. There's obviously KB. I mentioned his book earlier. He's one of those guys that I'm like, if there's anyone I want to model my life after, it's him, 100%. Because he's kind of like the pastor, rapper, author guy, and that's exactly what I want to be. So yeah, there's KB, and then there's like kind of just the influencer people. I'm a big fan of Fred Rogers, Mr. Rogers. He's one of my biggest inspirations. I listen to him like before I go to bed, like just his interviews and stuff, like, so yeah.
What do you want to be known for?
Man, what a question. My fashion. I'm kidding. No.
It's on point. I like it. I do like it.
Man, I was listening to recently Kendrick Lamar's most recent album, which is like, he really walks through some of his childhood trauma, and I love it. It's such a good album. But at the very end, it was his wife and a little voice message. And this is how he closes the album out. This is his wife, and she says, congratulations. She says something like, you broke a generational pattern. And then it was his baby, and his wife was like, say thank you, daddy. And his baby was like, thank you, daddy. And that's how he closed the album out. And I'm like, man,
God gives me chills.
Yeah. And I'm like, that's what I want to, it's kind of morbid. I picture myself on my deathbed often. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, is what I'm doing now setting me up to leave a good legacy? We see so many Christian leaders, they don't end well, and that terrifies me, because my whole life, everything I do is to like break what was in my family. And whether that's like a good thing to spend your whole life chasing that's probably something I got to work through. But that's what I want to be known as, is somebody that, man, that guy, Chris, he was really a man of God, like, and he really loved the Lord. Same way we talk about David, man after God's own heart. I want to be that. Yeah.
I would say you already are that, and you will be that. I think it's a already and a continual, but I absolutely see. There's something about you, Chris, that is almost like you're a person of contradictions in a really beautiful way. Yeah. You come across really confident, but you're very humble. You are very creative emotional, but you're very thoughtful. A couple times I feel like I've asked you something, I can see the wheels turning, like the way, even the way you did that little rap at the beginning, you approach it. There's a thoughtfulness, there's a structure, a thoughtfulness, and there's this free, creative, it's a beautiful blend. Your kids will be really lucky.
Yeah, I appreciate that. That means a lot.
That. Okay, I have some rapid fire questions for you.
Oh, man.
Okay, you ready for this?
Yeah, let's go.
Which emoji do you use the most?
Oh, the laughing emoji.
The laughing, crying?
But even though most of the time, like, my face is like, you know.
While you're typing
I'll be like, man, that's so funny. You know?
I think we all do that.
Yeah.
Funniest sitcom character of all time.
Kirby, Sweet Life on Deck.
I don't know that.
Yeah, no, Sweet Life. Yeah, Sweet Life on Deck. Kirby. He was the security guard on the ship.
Okay. If you could grab lunch with any artist, living or dead, who would it be? Where would you eat, and what would you talk about?
Where would I eat? What would I talk about? Oh man. Okay, rapid fire. So first thing on my mind, Lady Gaga.
Ooh, good one.
Yeah, and I would
like that.
I would talk about where would I have lunch? Probably somewhere really expensive so she could pay for it. You know,
100%.
And I'd be like, oh man, I left my wallet in the car. You know, and she'd be like, oh no, it's no problem. I got it.
No problem.
It probably would be comped anyways because they, you know, she's Lady Gaga. But
what would you talk about?
What would we talk about? We would talk about probably something art, like telling a story through her art. I think she does a great job of that. So,
telling story through art. Okay, this one is challenging. You have to think fast, okay? If you could only save 1 or 2 of your songs and the rest are going to be deleted forever, which ones would you save? It's not really happening. Don't get scared.
Okay, yeah. Okay, 1 or 2, we're going to go with, I have a song called Glory, which that's kind of like a,
yep, I've heard
I put that like kind of like a prayer in my song. And then there's this, man, that's so hard. I love them all.
They're like your children, I know.
Yeah, and I have a song called Instagram Isn't God. I really like the production on that, and I like the message behind it. So
those would be your 2 you picked.
Yeah.
Okay, last one. When is the album dropping?
Next year. I'm looking at like the end of the first quarter, beginning of the second quarter. So we're March, April. We're looking at that. So
I'm excited.
Yeah, I'm really excited. It's been a lot of work going into it, but I know that it'll pay off. So yeah.
Hey, thank you so much. It's been awesome talking.
For sure. Thank you for having me.
Take my vices, take my crying. I've been vibing on God's timing. I was lonely, I went lonely. Fire chose me, I've been focused. Rain on all my days, I will cry. Max my pain with hiding. My eyes, Father, my God, clean out my